So to do my recap, I read The Hidden Psychology of Social Networks by Joe Federer, and three things that I really kind of wanted to talk about today, relating to obviously this project was the first thing that he kind of talked about was he talked about, and this was very explicit, he talked about how to create content that kind of drives the sharing of word of mouth. So oftentimes before things get popular, and trends and stuff like that, before things get popular, you'll see a viral video of it on the internet, and then it'll kind of turn into a conversation piece almost, especially with like millennials and young people with social networking apps like TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, etc., and so forth, those kind of things. So that was the first thing that I kind of wanted to learn, or that I wanted to kind of talk about here, was Joe describes the importance of that, and how, for example, if you see a trend on TikTok, usually first it's a viral video and it'll just keep getting views and clicks, and when it gets more views and clicks, you'll see it on your feed more and more times, and then that turns into a word of mouth, that turns into a conversation piece. So next thing you know, people are all talking about, like, can't tell you how many times I've heard this quote of, did you see that thing on TikTok, or did you see that TikTok that, so it turns into like a word of mouth conversation. That's one thing specifically that he talked about. I remember him talking about a brand called Madewell, which is jeans, and the cool thing about Madewell was it turned into this sort of kind of millennial e-commerce website. People went ahead and started looking into, the jeans, not really for the jeans, but because of the people that were affiliated with the jeans. There's this lady, Erica Hart, she's a female activist. She's a sex education, MED. She was very popular. She's a very popular influencer for this brand, and that kind of got people talking about it, the brand, a little bit more. It wasn't really the jeans themselves, it was more who was affiliated with the brand. So that's just another example of word of mouth. Second thing that Joe talked about pretty specifically was how to balance brand and social preferences across different networks. So as people don't know, Joe is actually affiliated with Reddit, which that was his previous job before he stopped working and obviously wrote the book that we're talking about. He talked about, there was a specific brand, Charles Schwab, that's a financial advisory firm, if people don't know. What people don't know as well is that he was seeing a lot of content on Reddit about Charles Schwab, which was his previous brand. So this was a financial advisory firm that people weren't having to go to Charles Schwab to learn about Charles Schwab. That's kind of the point that I was trying to make here. People would just look online on Reddit, and any information you wanted about the company, whether it was financial advice or anything, you really didn't need to go to your LPL Financial, your advisors. You don't need to go to that, because a lot of valuable information is actually posted on these social networks. Obviously, I'm talking about Reddit here, and you can get a free consultation via a Reddit paragraph, as opposed to having to go to financial advisory. So Charles Schwab kind of looked into this, and they kind of understood that, hey, we should be utilizing these social networks, as opposed to kind of like sectioning them off and referring to them as taboo, saying that no, this is not us. They're now kind of, companies like Charles Schwab are kind of meshing together with online like answering platforms, like for example Reddit, where, who knows, since it's all anonymous, a lot of people could work for Charles Schwab, and they could anonymously just write informational, educational articles on what to do with your money, how to save, if you win the lottery, what do you do with it, how do you invest it, those kind of things. And the last thing that I kind of wanted to hone in on that he talked about was why authenticity will only grow with importance to consumers. Now, I kind of had mixed feelings about this one, because I think a lot of times on the internet, especially if it's anonymous, there's a lot of devious people out there, and they might not really care what they're talking about. You have like internet trolls and stuff like that, and people that will just negatively talk about something, and it'll still get clicks. It'll still be authentic. People will still talk about it. It'll still be popular, simply just because of, I guess, the shock factor of what reading something that's just like, oh my God, like everybody's seen an explicit article on Twitter, or some explicit information. For example, I use this example in my article, the Israel-Palestine war. There'll be a huge picture of a decimated city, and everybody will just, that's shock value right there. While it is authentic and it is gaining traction, at the same time, a lot of people try not to look at stuff like this because, it's obviously explicit and graphic. However, you can't help but read about the articles and read what the comments are saying, and that is kind of develops the authenticity You also kind of see this a lot. This is an example that he uses, the company Ziploc bags, where, people don't really care much. I mean, it's a very boring product itself. However, through their exposure to life hacks and brands and YouTube videos on how to just creative ways to use the product that kind of gain more authenticity and traction. So to kind of relate these things, talking about it being important to customers or consumers, there really is no right or wrong answer when it comes to whether it's positive, whether it's negative. If it adds that shock value, people are going to kind of tune into it, they're going to read about it, they're going to see what the comments are saying, they're going to get educated on it. So that's probably the three biggest things I would say that I got out of this book.